Peter Ryan, and we quizzed him about juvenile crime. And as you may have seen on the news a few minutes ago, the sort of thing he was talking about: 2 off-duty officers attacked with an iron bar by a gang of youths. Commissioner Ryan pointed the finger at the children's courts and said too often they let young offenders off lightly. Tonight, the Chief Magistrate fights back, and it looks like we've opened a real can of worms, because he says it's police procedures that are to blame. Here's Peter Lloyd.
There are many cases across the whole state where people charged with very serious offences on multiple occasions are released by the court on bail only to commit more offences.
What signal does that send to juveniles about the likelihood of them being punished?
Well, I think they must feel that if they are caught, not a great deal happens to them, and they're very unlucky if they go to jail.
When Commissioner Ryan says the courts are too lenient on repeat offenders, is he right?
We're not going to win the war on juvenile crime by declaring war on our children. We're not going to win that war by making children the enemy, because they're not. We should be on their side. The vast bulk, 99% of all appeals against our decisions are against the severity of our decisions, not the leniency.
Stephen Scarlett says it's a bit rich for the police to complain about the courts. He says if young repeat offenders are getting off lightly, it's because of this computer system called COPS, which is meant to keep all criminal histories up to date. Histories the Children's Court relies on when passing sentence.
It's not always the case that, for instance, juvenile criminal histories are as good as they should be. Sometimes we have examples here where a magistrate will say, look, I saw this child only 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's not on the system.
In your experience, how many times have you come across that problem?
I wouldn't like to put a figure on it, but...
Once a week, twice a week?
Sometimes several times in a day.
One thing Stephen Scarlett and Peter Ryan do agree on is this.
There's no doubt about it. If you do the analysis between bad parenting, unemployment, lack of opportunity, poor education, long-term or persistent truancy, those are the constant factors that come up time and time again in young people who commit crime. Now, none of those are police problems, not one of them.
How much responsibility do you think for the problems you deal with stems from bad parenting?
A lot. We get very concerned about the fact that a number of children turn up without any member of their family here at all.
Does it sadden you when you sit there and see what is basically a child before you without the parent?
You get very sad in this jurisdiction. You get at times depressed in this jurisdiction about the way some parents let their children down.
When was the most recent case you can remember where you saw a child without the parent attending?
Yesterday.
Can you tell me about the circumstances of that?
It's just one of many.
Have you ever been tempted or wished you could lock the parents up?
Oh, I've said so at times in as many words.
7164, go ahead.
0201, copy that radio. We're just past that location now. There's just a little bit of activity, but nothing major.
On last night's program, we heard from Police Inspector Rod Gray, who said frustration with the court system is spreading right through the ranks.
How did police on the beat feel when they see those hardcore offenders back on the streets within days or weeks?
Well, it's disheartening.
How do you feel as a father and a magistrate when you see the same face in here time and time again?
Well, we get sick of seeing them, or you see a name on a list in custody and you groan and think, oh no, so-and-so's back. What's happened this time? And that becomes depressing and exasperating. Well, there's a small percentage of offenders, whether they're adults or children, who are psychopathic or sociopathic.
Have you looked into the eyes of a psychopath?
Oh, yeah.
What do you see there?
What I see often is an anger and a hatred towards the world.
For someone who sees all that anger, Stephen Scarlett is remarkably optimistic about young people. And despite his police critics, he knows exactly what sort of court he wants to run.
If the Children's Court, under my leadership, is going to be anything, it'll be both compassionate and strong. And we've got to have the strength to make firm decisions, whether they're popular decisions or not.
And in making those decisions, he says he never forgets what it was like to be a teenager.
What sort of juvenile were you?
I wasn't entirely perfect.
Please explain.
Like most of the teenagers I see, I did one or two pretty stupid things in my time. And teenagers can do some mighty dopey things. But the good thing about teenagers, even the one, and particularly the ones we see, is that most of them grow up into be very nice adults. Most teenagers do.
Peter Lloyd there with the Chief Magistrate of the Children's Court, Stephen Scarlett, not entirely perfect.